when you're suffering to a level you never thought you would? How can we stay close to God? How can you stay faithful when it seems like God is the one behind the pain? And what do the characters in Scripture, what do the people in Scripture teach us about how to be close to God in the midst of doubt? The story of Job is simple, but it is devastatingly painful and impactfully human. Job is tested by Satan, and God allows it to happen. And it seems based on a wager that Satan and God have. And Job, throughout all his incredible suffering, from his family dying to his fortune, his lands, and his money being completely taken, to even his own skin, his body is betraying him. There's boils, it's crazy. His wife tells him to curse God and die. His friends say, "What did you do wrong?" And amidst of all of this, it says that Job did not sin. At the end, God returns everything he had to him and more. But that's a crazy story. And of course, I'm glossing over it very quickly, but you should go read it if you haven't. The way I see it, we see 3 areas of testing that we'll be talking about in the next couple weeks. The first area of testing is doubt and wisdom. The second is faith and trust. And the third is forgiveness and reconciliation. Today, we're talking about doubt and wisdom. You see, when I go through pain, and maybe when you do, we can be tempted to kind of stuff away the pain, ignore it, and maybe just carry on with life, just keep going. However, that's not healthy, and that's actually not the way God designed us to be. Essentially, your pain will catch up with you. If it's not stored in your body and comes out later as trauma, it will catch up to you. Maybe when you slow down and you have a moment to think to yourself. Maybe late at night, and you don't want to go see that stuff again, but the things that your pain can drive you to do, to self-medicate and or forget, escape for a little bit, can be devastating to your life. Your pain will catch up with you, so let's stop running. Let's figure out what Job tells us about how to deal with pain, doubt, and wisdom. In the book of Job, Job lobs these complaints against God, and he pontificates on how God can be good and loving, and yet these things are happening to him. And these are a summary of Job's biggest complaints against God. And let me know if these sound familiar. Job complains about God's failure to hear him. God is punishing Job. God allows the wicked to prosper. God is far away and silent. God won't vindicate him and fix his problems. These are crazy complaints. These are doubts that seem heavy and weighty, and maybe for some of you, very real. What does God do with this? Maybe James can give us an insight into how God sees doubt, and it can shift our perspective a little bit. James wrote this letter to the church, and in it, the very first chapter, he says this: "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do." So on one hand, you have Job lobbing these crazy, weighty complaints against God, and on the other hand, you have James who says, don't doubt. What is Scripture trying to say? What does God want? You see, it's actually not that black and white. There are 2 types of doubt. There's a doubt that leads to wisdom and a doubt that leads to unbelief. One type of doubt is a healthy one. It uncovers reality, even if it's painful. It asks good questions about the way the world is, and that's the kind of doubt that is good and healthy. I love this quote talking about this kind of doubt that defines it as, "It leads to an insight of application of truth in a specific situation." The other type of doubt is different. The type of doubt that works against the believer rather than for the believer is one that questions God's integrity and character to its very core. Doing that often enough turns your heart hard against God. It sets your heart against it. Unless we give God and surrender our circumstances and we give him the kind of the benefit of the doubt, our hearts will be turned hard against God. And we literally become unstable or double-minded. The literal translation of this word in James, the word he uses, is actually double-souled. It gives you a really interesting visual about how someone who doubts that God is really who he says he is trying to serve God but can't. He's serving two people and he's ripping himself apart. He can't do it. You either have God as your master or anything else as your master. So what do we take from this? If you allow me to pastor you for a second, I would ask you to ask God the hard questions. He can handle it. If you don't think he can, read through the Psalms. And Job is a great example, but read through the Psalms. They are unflinching, painful, emphatic cries to God in injustice, in poverty, in good times and bad times. It's a complete illustration of the human heart and God, the tension that we can have, but yet at the end, when a heart is fully surrendered to God. What the Psalms show us and what Job shows us, at least this first part of Job, is that it's okay to express how you feel to God. When's the last time that you actually ask God a question that you really want to ask him? I hope that you do this often. If you do, that's amazing. But at least for me, I'm a pastor, and often I don't find myself asking God good questions because I think he either knows the answer or what, something like that. But that's not really the point sometimes. A lot of times, a relationship is bonded not through just great times and good memories, but through suffering and heartache. And that's where Jesus is found. Jesus will find us in the suffering and in the good times, but especially in the suffering. So go and be blessed. Ask God the hard questions. I promise you, he can handle it. He wants you to, and he will be there for you. See you soon.